Welcome to MSUA's Game Changers Live, where we speak with satellite and mobile connectivity thought leaders about industry trends, new technologies, and share what you need to know about the future of satellite technology. I'm your host, Lisa Dreer. I'm excited to introduce our guest for today, Robert Sakker. He is the president of Pivotel America. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Lisa. Appreciate you having me here.
Absolutely. Maybe you can start by just giving our audience a little bit of background on yourself and Pivotel.
Certainly. I come from the cellular industry originally, so with Vodafone in Australia. And how Pivotel was formed was that we bought the Globalstar assets from Vodafone and started off as Globalstar Australia. And then we developed that business over many years. So Globalstar had some troubles with their network in 2007. And at that point, we had an agreement with Iridium and moved some of our customers across to the Iridium network. Subsequently, we picked up a service provider agreement with Turaya. And so we've been a Turaya partner in the Australian market. And then eventually we started to work with Inmarsat as well. So Pivotel started off as being fairly regional. So a sort of dominant mobile satellite provider in the Australia and New Zealand markets. But in 2017, we bought a company called Global Marine Networks, the company behind the Redport products and services. And that was in Tennessee. And in 2018, I moved across to run the Pivotel America business from Tennessee. And then we've grown from them with some acquisitions. So we now have operations in North America, in Latin America, Europe, obviously our core market in Australia and New Zealand, and also in Southeast Asia as well, Indonesia particularly.
Wow, that must have been quite a change moving from Australia to Tennessee.
Well, it has been quite a change, and it's certainly been a change with COVID because I haven't been back to Australia for 18 months or so.
Oh,
and then my daughter was doing high school, so my family stayed there. But yeah, it's been an interesting 18 months, which I'm sure has affected everyone as well. But yeah, it's good. I love it here in Tennessee, East Tennessee. So it's good, and we've got some great people and some really good opportunities as well.
that's terrific. So maybe, we invited you here today to have you talk a little bit about the future of mobile satellite connectivity and where it's headed. And maybe we can start by having you talk just a little bit about what you feel is the most important role that the satellite industry has to play in the future of mobile connectivity.
Well, I think it's a really interesting question, particularly when you talk about mobile connectivity, because that's not just satellite. One of the things I didn't say about Pivotel is that we're a mobile network operator in Australia. We're an infrastructure-heavy company. We've got a voice network, a global voice network, a global data network. And so coming from a cellular background and effectively continuing in the cellular industry alongside the mobile satellite industry has been a sort of key part of the DNA of Pivotel. So just a couple of themes around this with mobile connectivity. Mobile satellite services, at least the handheld mobile satellite services, were born from the cellular industry. So Motorola was the key technology partner behind Iridium, Qualcomm, the key technology partner behind Globalstar, and Vodafone and AirTouch, as it was at the time, were key investors in the Globalstar technology. So in the early 90s or late 80s, early 90s, the concept was that GSM cellular networks would never move outside of the cities, and therefore a satellite network would be a key feature. And so that's why those investments were made. So at least the handheld mobile satellite providers were born from the cellular industry. It's interesting, some years after that, they're effectively killed by the cellular industry. If you look back at what happened with Iridium and Globalstar, and I think that was due to business cases that didn't stack up when cellular networks expanded significantly more than were forecast by the original investors. And the interesting thing now is that it's almost come full circle. So instead of cellular and satellite being competitors, we strongly see cellular and satellite as being collaborators. And we're seeing that almost satellite, some years ago, we used to talk about satellite being a cellular extension. It's interesting with some of the use cases that are coming up now that Cellular is almost an extension of satellite. Satellite is the technology that's got the ubiquitous coverage. Cellular enables you to extend that into other areas and environments. And look, an example of that would be Inmarsat announcing Orchestra, which is their combination of their existing GEO satellite assets, a planned LEO network, which obviously would be lower latency, and 5G. And that's really combining cellular with satellite to get a result for customers, particularly in congested ports and other areas where you really want to hand off. On cellular technology, the reason why you used to camp on 4G when your phone had 3G and 4G is that the network's all designed to push your service across onto the high capacity service, the high density. And so if 4G is available, your phone will go into 4G. Same with 4G and 5G. If 5G is available, you'll be pushed off onto the denser small cells of 5G. And so this sort of concept plays very well with satellite. So if you're on the satellite network and cellular is available, we see in the future that there'll be satellite will be pushing you off the satellite network onto the higher capacity cellular network. So we see satellite and cellular as being key in the future for mobile connectivity.
Sure. So you kind of mentioned use cases. What would be some example use cases?
Well, I think a key use case for us is what we call a connected vehicle or a connected vessel, where essentially you're installing technology, whether it's cellular access or it's satellite access, onto the vessel. And then essentially you're driving around a bubble of connectivity. So, on that connected vessel or that connected vehicle, the last mile connection might be 5G, but it could be backhauled over satellite. It could be backhauled over cellular. In some circumstances, it could be Wi-Fi. But we see that as being a key concept where essentially you're driving your bubble of coverage around wherever you go. If you're in the city, you're taking advantage of city-based networks. And if you're in a rural or regional area, you may well be on satellite. But the concept being is that from a consumer's perspective, you don't care so much about the connectivity technology. You just care about being always on and always connected.
Absolutely. And would that work across international boundaries? As you know, I'm here in the Seattle area, so Canada is really close. So if you're crossing an international boundary like that, could you see that bubble follow you across those international boundaries as well?
Yeah, so one of the good things about satellite is it's generally global in nature. Some are more global than others in terms of how they describe themselves, but generally satellite is ubiquitous around the globe. On the cellular side, there's international roaming. And so those sort of concepts can go across international boundaries. So we would see cellular being international roaming and satellite being just your fallback when you don't have cellular connectivity.
Sure. So when you think about the user perspective, you kind of mentioned how we don't, as a user, we don't really care where that connectivity is coming from, just that it is available. And when you think about that, what are the criteria we as users, whether that be, a corporate user or an enterprise user or a consumer potentially, what are those criteria that we need to be looking for in our satellite services? And, what do we need to be taking into consideration?
Well, I think to start off with, historically, the satellite's been sold as connectivity. So it's very important to get an antenna, or it's very important to have satellite connectivity. And we're moving to this concept where we're not actually selling satellite technology, we're selling connectivity combined with cellular. So we're seeing a whole lot of different applications. So I would see it as, the satellite industry or mobile satellite industry is moving from basic connectivity to service enablement. Now, from a consumer perspective, that might just be access to social media, whether that's just messaging on social media or whether it's, voice and video and sound. That just depends on the bandwidth that you've got available for you to do that. In an enterprise example, it may be a connection back to your corporate VPN and the ability to access your corporate applications or email or some of your business systems. And we're seeing that across both maritime environments that we work in with our commercial maritime business based out of Europe, into land business and even government. Down in Latin America, we've got quite a bit of business with in Colombia for national police, security forces, and those sort of things. And when they're out on operations, what they need to do is to make sure that they're communicating back to their headquarters the sort of information that they need to transmit.
Great. When you look at the satellite services and solutions, what do we need to look for in those actual services that we're utilizing?
Yeah, sure. Look, I might go back and talk a little bit more about your question about criteria first, and then we'll come back to that.
Sure.
So if you're looking at the criteria for satellite services, you've really got to understand the business case that you're trying to focus on. And I see probably three groups of business cases to concentrate on. One is IoT, where you're really looking at messaging from devices or collecting data or distributing data. Another is personal messaging, whether that's voice or messaging. And then finally, there's a whole suite of applications and services enabled by IP data. So if you start with IoT, you've really got to understand what the use case, what you're trying to do. And a couple of examples of that would be, we've made an investment in a company called Ceres Tag. They make cattle tags for tracking cattle around the world.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, if you're looking for a device like that, it's got to be solar powered. These things go on ear tags, so there's got to be a very small form factor that will fit on the ear of a cattle. The cattle has a life cycle, so the cattle tag has to be able to power itself and message over that life cycle, and it's got to be cheap enough that the farmer would see value in doing that. Now, we've been talking to some cattle farmers in Latin America, and they really can't do the farm-to-table tracking that they need to do to get maximum value from their beef production. Whereas in a more developed country like Australia with RFID tags, they are able to do that sort of tracing from farm to table. So, a technology like a satellite cattle tag could significantly increase the value of cattle in these other remote areas. Other considerations are things like, do you need an always-on connection for IoT, or do you need to have just an alerting management function? Costs and sensors and network connectivity are all other considerations as well. So does each device have to transmit over the satellite, or does each device need to use a local area network back to a central point and then use satellite to deliver that data back to where it's going to get used? On the handset side, key considerations are, where are you going to use the device? For instance, Toraya is a regional network that doesn't cover the Americas, and therefore you can't use a Toraya handset in North or South America, but it's a fantastic solution in EMEA, and it works very well in Australia. In addition to that, an interesting thing that we've seen is the positioning of the mobile satellite operators who use handsets. So over time, we've seen that Iridium's really moved to take a premium quality position, but that comes at a cost. It's high cost. Toraya, on the other hand, has come at a very low cost and consumer-based solutions. And so in the markets where consumers need to use mobile satellite handheld, Toraya is a very cheap, cost-effective option. The interesting one in the middle is Inmarsat, where, let's say in the Australian market, they're sort of caught between premium Iridium and cheaper Toraya. But you take Inmarsat across the Latin American market, it's got a strong position there because it doesn't have that competition from the regional player. So that's another consideration of that. The other trend I think that we've seen in the market is there's definitely been new market development in personal messaging devices. So for many years, your personal device was a voice telephone. Nowadays, there's a number of devices that operate with personal messaging. Global Star Spot device, I think, was the one that really created that personal messaging market. and subsequently that's been followed in with Iridium SBD-based devices like, Garmin's device and other devices on the market as well. So that's been an interesting trend that we've seen as well. IP data, talk a little bit about that. Bandwidth is a key consideration, and bandwidth can be either by technology, so that might be the difference between an L-band service that might work up to 400 kilobits per second into a KU service or a KA service. It might be that you take a technology like KU that can operate at higher bandwidth, but you only buy a small bandwidth plan. So you can either do it by cost or technology. I think systems, weight, and power considerations are certainly still there with IP data. If you're operating a drug enforcement operation in Latin America, you don't want to carry around a bulky terminal with you that man packing through the jungle. So having a IP-based solution that is actually really portable is pretty critical. Another question I think for users is the difference between metered data and unlimited data plans. So for instance, if you compare a Certus solution, it's reasonably clear at this stage that Iridium want to stay with a metered data plan. That means you pay for your usage, for all of your usage, whereas there are some Inmarsat based solutions that are can be unlimited data. They might get shaped in terms of bandwidth, but they're unlimited data. And then KU and KA based services tend to be unlimited based services as well. And look, finally, there's things like network congestion. One of the ideas I know that Certus has got in the maritime environment is that as you come into congested ports using a KU based service, it stops working. If you've got critical shipboard reporting and communications that you need to get out there, then moving that off onto a Certus terminal means that the congestion that you're seeing on your KU or KA based service won't be there necessarily on your Certus service. So I think there's a whole lot of considerations there that users need to think about in how they, what solutions they take.
Sure. So you talked about different services and solutions for different areas of the world. What if you're a global organization that is operating in many different countries or very, different geographies? Is there interoperability between these systems?
The systems don't really interoperate. I mean, cellular systems do, but satellite systems don't interoperate at all. But one of the things I suppose we've been able to do as Pivotel, because we've got our own network and we have roaming onto Taraya's network, onto Inmarsat's network and Iridium's network, we're able to put services out there with local numbers. So for instance, if you were a US-based NGO that needed to operate in various markets around the world, we could provide all of your services with a local US number, and wherever you went in the world, people that are trying to call you would call you on your local US number and you'd be able to call out. So we would see that as a form of integration, particularly when if you've got a mixed fleet. So if you've got some people that are using Taraya devices calling Iridium or calling Inmarsat, then it really is a call to that local number. So that's, I suppose, the level of integration that's possible given each of the mobile satellite networks have different technology.
Got it. So what should users be looking for from their satellite services provider?
Well, interesting again in the mobile satellite services space, the concept of a partner for many, many years really meant distribution or it meant supply. And that's what a partner meant. And what we're seeing with this move from basic connectivity into service enablement, that the partner ecosystem is getting much more complex. So you're seeing application providers, service providers, a whole range of different people moving into the space that need to be part of that partner ecosystem. And what that really drives is innovation in those partners, because again, from a partner perspective, you want someone that's solution focused, not technology focused. So you really don't want someone just selling you an antenna and selling you airtime. What you want that partner of yours to be selling you is an outcome, a solution, whether it's a telehealth outcome, whether it's a ability to connect back into office systems, whether it's a business productivity solution. But that's where I think everything's heading in terms of partners. You need to look, they've got to be solution focused, they've got to be innovative, they've got to be able to deliver a differentiated solution.
Sure. Well, great. Robert, I want to thank you so much for being here today and sharing your insights on mobile satellite connectivity and also cellular connectivity. And I really look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Well, thanks very much, Lisa. It's really an exciting time to be in the industry, particularly with all the investment that's going on. So thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. I also want to thank the Mobile Satellite Users Association for hosting these sessions. To learn more about the Mobile Satellite Users Association, or MSUA, visit msua.org. We also are running specials right now for our 30th anniversary. That's right. The MSUA is going to be 30 years old in 2022. And we have early bird membership renewals as well as new memberships available right now. Head on over to our website, msua.org/join, to learn more about these special offers. And we look forward to seeing you again on the next MSUA Game Changers Live.